The Smarty Pants. Chapter 1. Nearly Impossible. Harold Goober Hausenpfeffer Jr. is Webkinz' world's greatest scientist. If you're ever near his lab and you hear, "Atomicalicious," you know Goober has invented something great. But as hard as Goober works to make life easier for all Webkinz, there was a time when he just wanted to make life easier for himself. When Goober was 10, he kinda didn't like school. Math, science, English. That stuff was so hard. It seemed nearly impossible. Goober wanted things to be fun and easy. Who wouldn't? For Goober, fun meant being a pitcher on his baseball team. But to do that, Goober's coach, Gus, said he would have to learn to throw a curveball. Goober tried, but it was, you guessed it, nearly impossible. This annoyed Goober because he was always looking for the easy way out. On his way home from baseball practice, Goober dropped in on his friend, Artie, at the Kinsville Curio Shop. Goober loved exploring the shop, but today he just complained, "Why do things have to be so hard?" Artie had heard Goober say this many times before. "What if I could show you a magical way to make everything really easy?" asked Artie. Chapter 2. Smarty Pants. Artie, owner of the Kinsville Curio Shop, had just offered Goober a magical way to make his life easy. "Ha! I'd like to see that," moped Goober. Artie held up a pair of lime green and yellow plaid pants. "These were invented by Leonardo da Vinci," said Artie. "He invented pants?" asked Goober. "No, Leonardo da Vinci was the smartest Webkinz there ever was," said Artie. Artie said that he found an urban myth site that led to an underground blog that led to a guy named Bart Biffmabob, who said the real reason Leo was smart was his pants were really Smarty Pants. Bart let Artie buy them for a special low price before they went up on WebBay. If Goober wore the pants and became really smart, nothing would be nearly impossible again, so even though the pants were really ugly, Goober tried them on. Suddenly words popped out of his mouth. A sign on the sidewalk would increase pedestrian traffic and push quarterly sales up by 14%. Goober had no idea where that thought came from. Could it be true? Could putting on a pair of pants make you an instant genius? Chapter 3. Bicyclopters and Other Wonderful Things. Goober couldn't believe that simply putting on Leo da Vinci's Smarty Pants had made him an instant genius. He had to test them out. Of course, when everyone at school saw Goober in his new, ugly, uncool green and yellow plaid pants, they pointed and laughed. But it didn't take long for Goober to turn jeers into cheers. On the baseball diamond, with visions of geometry filling his head, Goober figured out how to throw the perfect curveball. When he took the mound, Goober's curveball was so perfect, he threw nothing but strikeouts. At school, where Goober had struggled through his last math test, barely getting a D, now he breezed through the test, finishing it in 5 minutes flat. At home, while puttering around in the garage, Goober got inspired with so many ideas. What started out as fixing a flat tire on his bike ended up turning an old ceiling fan into a pedal-propelled bicyclopter. Goober's little brother, Booger, was amazed at the sight of Goober flying around the treetops. Back on the ground, Goober bragged how he would no longer have to take the bus every morning. But Goober just couldn't leave well enough alone. Chapter 4. Goober's luck runs out. Even though Goober's curveball was the best his coach Gus had ever seen, Goober couldn't stop himself from perfecting it. He scribbled some geometry on a piece of paper, and at the next game he had the ball curving back into his mitt like a boomerang. The coaches, umpires and parents all started arguing whether Goober was breaking the rules. They argued so much the game was cancelled. It didn't take a genius for Goober to figure out everyone was angry at him. At school, Goober was called down to the principal's office, where he found out he got a perfect score on his math test. Goober thought he was going to get an award or be told that he didn't have to take math ever again. Instead, he had to take the test again. This time, he finished in 2 minutes. Sure that he was stashing a cheat note somewhere, the principal made Goober change into his gym clothes and take the test yet a 3rd time. No kid had ever endured such humiliation. Without the Smarty Pants on, he barely got a D-. The principal sent Goober home with a note for his parents to sign. Chapter 5. Trading Back. With the principal's note weighing heavy in his pocket, Goober stopped in on the curio shop on the way home from school. When Artie asked him how the Smarty pants were working out, Goober had to admit, not so good. After telling Artie everything that happened, Goober realized that in trying to make things easy for himself, he had only made them much, much harder. He asked Artie if he could trade for his old pants back. Minutes later, a relieved Goober was walking home, feeling much more comfortable in his own jeans, ready to face whatever consequences were waiting for him at home. That is, until he saw the police cars and the fire trucks and the mayor. Goober feared the worst. Maybe his family was going to get kicked out of town. And all because he had put on those stupid pants. But if it was all Goober's fault, no one seemed to care. Everyone was looking up. Oddly enough, the ladders of the fire trucks were extended in the air, but there was no fire that Goober could see. That's when he heard the familiar cry of his little brother. Chapter 6. Back to the curio shop. The Firekins, Policekins, the mayor and Goober's parents were all looking up in the sky when Goober heard the familiar cry of his little brother. It was just like when Goober kicked Booger out of his bedroom, only this time it was for real. Everyone pointed, and then suddenly Goober's flying bicyclopter appeared above the treetops, with Booger on it pedalling for all he was worth, and screaming for someone to get him down. Everyone was shouting directions and wondering how in Webkinz world did Booger get such a thing. Goober tried to tell them, but everyone, including his mum and dad, were too concerned with Booger to hear. When Booger started heading out over Lake Kinz, Goober ran as fast as he could back to the curio shop. He would put the Smarty pants back on and build another bicyclopter. There were more than enough parts in the garage. But to Goober's horror, the curio shop had a big closed sign on the door. Hoping Artie was bligging or blogging or whatever he called it when he was on his computer, Goober banged and banged on the glass, but Artie never came. Chapter 7. Not So Smart. Unable to get the Smarty pants from Artie's curio shop, Goober ran back home just in time to see all the fire trucks and police cars leaving. A Policekins on a motorcycle radioed the Air Force to scramble their jets. Goober saw his parents running towards the mayor's limo. Goober's mum was so upset, all she could think to say was, "Do your homework, we'll be back soon." Mum and Dad jumped into the limo, and with a squeal of its tires the long white car zoomed off. Goober couldn't believe it. His little brother could be halfway to the moon, and his mum would still tell him do his homework. Goober sat down on the floor of the garage, wondering what to do. Without Leo Divinal's Smarty pants, building another bicyclopter would be, you guessed it, nearly impossible. But what choice did Goober have? None. So he squeezed his eyes as tight as he could, trying to remember how did he put together the flying bicycle so easily? And then suddenly a word came out of his mouth. It didn't pop, it didn't burst, more like leaked. Ceiling fan? He asked himself. Chapter 8. Goober to the Rescue. Goober remembered it had started with a broken ceiling fan. Goober grabbed some parts, and the more parts he grabbed, the more he remembered. In no time, Goober had surprised himself by recreating his bicyclopter. With no time to test it, Goober started pedaling, coasting out of the garage on a pair of wobbly wheels in badly need of a few extra spokes. Standing up, Goober pedalled harder and harder. Why did everything have to be so hard, he muttered, until the bicyclopter lifted off the ground. Up Goober climbed until he rose above the trees, and Lake Kinz appeared in the distance. Goober put his head down. This would be just like the time he had to pedal real hard to get away from his mean cousin Drugger, only worse. Out over the lake, as Booger struggled to stay in the air, suddenly some big jets whooshed by. Booger wondered if he saw his dad in the back of one. It was hard to tell because his face was hidden by a bag over his mouth. All Booger knew is he wanted to get down because he was starting to get tired. Chapter 9. Heading Home. At home, as he flew high above his house, Booger had tried slowing down, but the bicyclopter dropped so much he got scared and kept pedalling. Now Booger wondered if there was a mattress factory on the other side of Lake Kinz, where the crazy owner had decided that today they would make all their mattresses outside. He could only hope. "Booger!" someone called behind him. Booger tried to look around, but it scared him too much. A second later, Goober rose up beside his little brother, pedalling hard and almost out of breath. "What are you doing?" he asked. Big brothers were always asking dumb questions, and this was no exception. "How do I know?" cried Booger. Instead of yelling at his little brother like he normally would have, Goober calmly told him to lean to one side and bank the bicyclopter until it was turned around. When Booger had done that, the brothers started heading home. They even managed to wave to their dad as he zoomed by in the Air Force jet again. Booger could tell his dad was feeling better because the green look on his face had been replaced with a more familiar scowl. Chapter 10. Coming in for a landing. As they flew over their house, Goober told Booger to lean even further to one side while slowing down his pedalling. When Booger was a little unsure, Goober said it would be just like watching their paper airplanes spiral down when they threw them from their bedroom windows. Booger understood this right away, because in a few seconds he had landed the bicyclopter on the front lawn like he had been doing it for at least a whole half week. When Goober had landed his own makeshift copter, Booger gave him a big hug, something he rarely did, now that he was old and everything. Booger asked Goober how did he get to be so smart. It wasn't easy, was all Goober could think to say, as the fire trucks and police cars and Mayor's limo came squealing to a halt in front of their house. This time the newspaperkins were there, and Gus, Goober's coach, and the principal too. They all crowded around Goober. Everybody, but especially Goober's parents, wanted to know, no, they demanded to know, just where he had got all these crazy ideas. Goober took a big gulp. Chapter 11. Webkinz, World's Greatest Scientist. With everyone crowded around him, Goober wanted to tell them about Leonardo Divinal and the lime green and yellow plaid pants, but afraid no one would believe him, Goober remembered instead that time-honoured response kids have used throughout all of history when confronted by their parents. He shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't know. Later, Artie told Goober he was wrong about the Smarty pants, because they sure didn't work when he put them on. His girlfriend neither. Artie got his money back from that rip-off artist Bart Biffmabob. So Goober figured out, even without a pair of Smarty pants, not all hard things were nearly impossible. Sometimes you just need a little clue to get started. Goober also figured out he liked learning how to throw a curveball, because when he really threw one, he knew he had done it all by himself. And finally, he figured out that he liked making things in the garage. And that's how he became Webkinz, World's Greatest Scientist. So if you're ever walking by his lab and you hear, "Atomicalicious," maybe you better stand back from the door. You never know what nearly impossible thing might come bursting out.